Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey there. Hey again.
what's up? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad at all. Just came back from birthday dinner for my mother-in-law.
Oh, how
Oh,
nice.
Yeah,
Good.
nice. Yeah.
Lynn, is that you up there in the right-hand corner?
Who's that?
It's Suzanne. I don't know why it's not. Wait, let me go back here. It's
Wait,
not. There we go. There we go.
yes, and I have to change my name and then it'll be, I won't be Diagnostic iPad anymore. I'll be Lynn. I have it every time I go, hi, Suzanne.
Hi,
Aunt
good
Lonnie.
to see you.
You too.
Whoop.
Elon, you're looking good.
Really? Thank you. That's my mistake. I don't do anything.
Well, whatever you're doing, it's working.
Actually, it's not true. It's just that's really like bad false modesty. I started swimming a lot. The sea is
Swimming?
yeah, the sea is really nice and calm these last couple of weeks because of the war and everything and the rockets. They closed the public pools.
Oh.
Closed for a long time. So,
You know, Elon, I live in the Northeast. I live in New York. And there's been a lot more security around the synagogues and the nursery schools affiliated with the synagogues. My grandson's synagogue was closed on the day of rage that had been declared. So everybody's on alert. Even all the members of the synagogues are being charged extra money for security, which they've never done before.
yeah. Yeah, I see it. You see it from here in Israel, how this is affecting the world. My brother's in London, my brother-in-law is in Paris. Um, it's also it was very interesting. My brother is a psychologist. He's working at the psychoanalytical center in London. It's a big thing. And for the first 2 weeks after the 7th of October, none of his colleagues came up to him and asked him how he is. And he
Really?
more and more angry. And at a certain point, we had a conversation, and he was saying, "Okay, tomorrow I'm going to go and rawr at everybody for not saying anything." These are psychologists. It's people who know how to talk about feelings.
Yeah.
Horrible.
I told him instead of getting angry, which is very much a my side of the family kind of way of dealing with these emotional things. I told him that he should just go and talk to his boss and say to him, "I feel like nobody's asked, and I don't understand why would this be." Right? And he went and he said that to his boss, and the boss told him, "Everybody's scared. Everybody's scared of saying something about this issue." Mhm. And I suddenly could understand how much fear there is outside. It's very different from here in Israel. The fear is very a different kind of matter.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Okie dokie.
Always associate with okie dokie with you, Elon.
Me and
Always.
or something like that. Okay. I'm gonna start. I want us again, like last time, to try and be within the parameters of our time and to at least finish the discussion bit. And then if we need some more time for questions, I'll obviously be here. Today's discussion session is more about Israel. Last time we talked about Gaza. Yeah, I found it important to start with Gaza because, like I said before, it's a black box. We don't really know what's happening there and how things are working and what are people's motivations and how are their lives. and I wanted to start there. Israel is a bit different, so we feel much more connected to it. So we'll deal with Israel now. But I'll start with something. You've all been with me on tours, but I do tours for different companies, different organizations in different ways. So some of you have met me in a very touristy side, and some have met me, for example, on leading religious tours, or some have met me leading Jewish tours or leading political tours, which I also do. So you might have seen different sides of me, right? So I just want to kind of like at least introduce myself again to you. I do all of these. I love being a tour guide. I love, as you know, the explaining and trying to get to understanding and how does an idea move from one head to another. Um, but I do a lot of political work as well. So I'm involved in a tourism company that is both Israeli and Palestinian. I live in Jaffa for a reason, because it is a mixed city. Me and my family were involved in starting a kindergarten and a school, which are bilingual, that bring together Arabs and Jews, Muslims, Christians in one school. So that's the slant I come from, right? Everybody has his slant, and it doesn't make what you say less true, but it does make it only a part of the truth, right? I do admit there are other parts, and they're wrong because I know that they're wrong, right? And I know I'm always right, but not everybody agree with me. Yeah. Okay. I say that, but I also want to say that from another perspective, it's for me, it's very important to understand Gaza and the other side. What are their motivations? How do they think? Why do they do things? And what do they think about me? But also, what do they think about their own lives? And this comes from my basic background. My father is a Holocaust survivor. And when I worked in Yad Vashem, when I was a student,
in 42 miles speed camera ahead, 25 miles per hour speed limit.
I will also mute everybody, and then we'll open it up once we'll have conversation. Okay. What was I saying? So I work in Yad Vashem, and one day we had a conversation with my father about the Holocaust. And as we were talking, I was using the word monsters to refer to the Nazis again and again. And at some point, he kind of stopped me and said, you know, if they're monsters, they're outside of the spectrum of humanity. They're no longer humans, right? And if you're no longer human, then you don't fall into the same categories and laws of humans. And one of the basic categories and laws in humanity is your actions have culpability, right? If you're a monster and you're kind of looking at somebody as something that's outside of what could be imaginable, then they don't have the same type of culpability. If you don't understand them, then you can damn them forever because they're not of the same kind as me. My father's view was the Nazis were the worst where humans can get to, but they were just as human as Mother Teresa. Right? That's a gamut. And I believe in that. Therefore, it's always important for me to understand. And in that way, I can also keep the culpability towards those that did what they did on the 7th of October. Okay, that's my, from where I come. So I wanted to give you that just that you kind of have a bit more of my slant and know where I'm coming from. Okie dokie. I'm going to share your screen. I'm going to do a bit of this presentation, and then we'll come back and talk a bit about what was it. Okay, you do this. My the screen is loading. You see the share screen now? Yeah? Okay. Perfect. So this is last time that we talked. We tried to talk about why is Hamas so popular in Gaza amongst the Palestinians, and what the main reason is its origin as a charity organization, what's called in Arabic dawah. It's massive charity work and it's massive education work are the main basic reasons that it has such success. But not only that, it is not a charity organization. It might have started off like that, but it is a militant organization fighting for what they termed freedom of Palestine, right? That in the Hamas understanding includes all of their historic lands, which include also Israel. And their three main points are, first of all, religion. It's a religious organization. This is hardline fundamentalist religion. Meaning, when I use the word fundamentalist, I'm not just saying crazy. I'm trying to say that for them, the most fundamental thing in the world is their faith, and through it to get to salvation. So everything they do falls into that. The 7th of October attack, in their press release, and they had a press release for that attack. They called it Al-Aqsa Storm, right? It is full of religious text, of them quoting the Quran. Everything comes from religion. And as the Palestinian population is highly religious, it works well. Second thing is they've always promised the return of prisoners. For them, that's a very high goal. The leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, was 22 years in Israeli jail. As other tens of thousands of people went through the Israeli jail system. We see them as convicted terrorists, criminals, and so forth. 539 of them are murderers who are in Israeli jail, right? But they see them as political prisoners. So for them, the idea is to return prisoners. And each time Hamas does a big action, for example, when they kidnapped the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in 2014, it took 5 years. And in the end, Israel, in exchange for that soldier, released 1,027 prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, including Yahya Sinwar, who became the leader of Gaza, of Hamas run Gaza, and is the orchestrator of the 7th of October. And press, okay, land. The Palestinian story, let's put it like this, the Israeli story is a story of we had a historical land, a biblical land, a land that we yearned and pined for as Jews throughout history, wherever we were. And with some sort of special cosmic moment, God's favor shone back upon us, and we succeeded in 1948 in creating Israel. So our story is based on the idea that we had land and we got it back. Palestinian story is built differently. It says we had land and slowly we have less. 2 points in Israel-Palestine history where land was returned to Palestinians or given to Palestinians, depending on your perspective. That was after the Oslo Accords, the peace treaty that Bill Clinton negotiated between, and others, between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat. And there Israel gave to Palestinians partial rule over part of the West Bank. And the second time that Palestinians got some land was when Hamas used so much violence during the Second Intifada that Israel decided to unilaterally leave Gaza Strip and give it back, or give it away, depends how you look at it. So in the Hamas terminology, land is incredibly important, and they are winners. They have religion, they give back prisoners, and they got back land. Add that to them being a very large charity organization, that's the reason that they're popular. At the same time, before the 7th of October, 72% of Palestinians thought the Hamas is corrupt. Today, in a poll that was done just 2 days ago, or this could be already yet, whatever, 2 days ago, around 45% of the people that were asked in Gaza say that they don't want Hamas anymore. In the West Bank, Hamas became much more popular. But in Gaza, people don't want them. But they're still enmeshed with them. Yeah. Okay. We ended the last time was asking this question about are Gazans Hamas? Is every person in Gaza Hamas? Is Hamas everybody? Is it a coercive relationship? And I showed you these two pictures on the right. This guy with the green bandana, the Kalashnikov from a GoPro of one of the Hamas terrorists attacking the kibbutz on the 7th of October. And on the other hand, children in Gaza, right? This is a very easy picture to distinguish, right? Hamas is the militant, children are children. They're civilians, they're innocent, right? But it's actually, in true life, it's not that easy to differentiate, you know? So this weird aerial photo is kind of in Gaza Strip about a month ago. Israel just gave the order for all the population in north of Gaza to move to the southern half of the Gaza Strip. What you see coming down kind of in a diagonal in this photo is thousands and thousands of people walking towards the south of the Gaza Strip. It's an enormous mass of people. Who there is a Hamas and who is Gazan amongst that crowd? This is how that crowd looks from the ground level. How do you distinguish who is which? They show their documents, they come up, there's a soldier, a whole battalion of soldiers there, and somehow they have to decide who is which, right? If they don't have a gun on them, how do you know if he likes the Hamas or not? If he's happy about what happened on the 7th of October or not? There are things that you cannot know. Sometimes we ask ourselves questions that we cannot give answers to. What are every person's allegiance? And then we have to ask ourselves a different type of question about the people, right? One that doesn't ask what do they think and believe. One that asks what are their actions. But that's a problem, because their actions, if they will have violent actions, we'll know it only after they were violent. So this brings us back to a place where you can't be certain. It will always be a level of uncertainty. And the question is, what level of uncertainty a society is willing to accept? Israel, to deal with Gaza for the last, since actually 2007, when the blockade officially started, Israel cordoned off Gaza, slowly making the border more and more impregnable, as we thought. There's a fence between us. Actually, it's a whole set of fences. In 2014, you might remember, there was a whole spate of Hamas digging tunnels into Israel towards the same kibbutzes they attacked, this time to attack them from underground, So for $3 billion, we built a fence with a concrete wall going down underground. Different points, it goes between 40 feet down to 250 feet down to stop the Hamas from digging under. Made more fences, observation towers, and lots of capabilities. We also have drones, we have eyes in the sky. So when you are collecting intelligence, there's different types of intelligence you're collecting. One is visual. What are people doing? So we have cameras in a variety of types till drones and spy planes all over. We have a lot of knowledge about what's happening on the ground. The single largest army unit is the A200 unit. A200 is our signal intelligence unit, what's called the SIGINT in the intelligence world. Signal intelligence is everything from your landline, your modem, your cell phone, 4G, 5G, electromagnetic. It's whatever information you can get in that sense. And Israel's signal intelligence unit is the single largest unit in the army. We have incredible amounts of information coming in like that. Incredible. And probably, these guys, human intelligence, right? That's the last component of your intelligence scope. It's actual operatives on the ground. And Israel has them within Gaza, even though Israel isn't inside Gaza before the 7th of October, where there were lots of Israeli spies inside. But when you have all of this information coming in, and those who know, in my military capacity, I was in Navy intelligence, right? So I come a little bit from this intelligence world. In intelligence, the problem is not about getting intelligence anymore. That might have been the problem in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when all the good spy novels were written. Today, actually, it is how to decide what information is good or bad. If you remember the 9/11 report, that was maybe one of the biggest things that came out of it. It's very hard to know what is important and what isn't. We have incredible amounts of information, right? You have snippets of conversation. Somebody said there's a gun, then somebody said this, and then this, and that. You don't know how to collect all of them. That's what you do in intelligence, really. Try and make sense of that. And when you make sense of that, you are trying to do it with two frameworks. You're trying to understand the other side's capabilities and its intentions. These are two different things. And in military intelligence, it's a very important differentiation. Units are built around this differentiation. If you understand the other side's capabilities, in the picture here, these guys with guns, this is the Hamas's elite unit called the Nukhba. And we try to understand their capabilities. How many of them are there? What can they do? What guns, what ammunition, what do they have, right? Trying to understand their capabilities. And on the other side, what we also do is try to understand the intent of the ones that could move these capabilities, right? So that's the leaders. What can we learn about their intent? We have tons of information there as well. Believe me, there's bugs on everything. There's lots of information. The Israeli intelligence failed on both counts. We can say it today by what we know. It will probably come out in the next couple of years with a lot of investigation, but it is very clear Israel failed on both counts. And as somebody who told you in the very beginning that I come from this more left-leaning side, let's say politically, I fell to these same mistakes as anybody else. I believe that the Hamas's intent, like many others did, is towards a situation that they will rule over Gaza. The more money, the more opportunities they'll have, these people in Gaza will choose more of a peaceful way. And I was told by my military constantly that they do not have capabilities. Our military was very clear. They do not have capabilities. If anybody we are scared of is Hezbollah. Hamas, they're a joke. This is popularly known in Israel, and it was the official line of the Israeli military intelligence. So Israel mistook that. And if you haven't heard of it, it's probably come out in the next couple of days. There's an Israeli officer in the intelligence, not a young person. She's been for 20 years in the intelligence. And she compiled a report about a operation that Hamas is planning called Jericho Shall Fall Again, right? Which is exactly what happened on the 7th of October. And it was published within the military intelligence world. We knew about these things. But in the end, in a military intelligence kind of situation, you have to weigh every piece of information you get. And just like I'm slanted, the scales aren't exactly at a zero. They're slanted by what we think about the other side. So the next part I'll talk about will be about Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's political thinking about Gaza Strip. Because that's the conception, the way we thought about Gaza, and what made us not understand the intent of Hamas and not understand their capabilities. What were our preconceived notions about Gaza? It made us, each time we heard the Hamas saying we should attack, we said to ourselves, that's just them talking. Each time we saw another gun coming in to Gaza, we said, it's not going to make a difference. We had a preconceived notion. The fact that we had a preconceived notion like that meant this. The most horrible aspect of this war, and there are so many horrible aspects of what Hamas did on the 7th of October, is the kidnapping. Around 250 people were kidnapped. We don't know the exact number because Hamas and the other militant groups in Gaza never told us the exact names. Around 250 people, 110 of them were released during that short ceasefire period. Women and children and a few elderly. All the children except 2 that Hamas have said that are dead, who died in, according to Hamas, bombings by the Israeli army. All the children were released. Amongst them, a pair of twins, 3-year-old, who were 52 days in Hamas captivity. Amongst them, a 6-year-old girl who was taken after both her parents were murdered. This is what happened because of Israel's unpreparedness. Obviously, it's because of Hamas's actions, but it's also because of our unpreparedness. And this is an incredible break in Israeli society today. It is incredible. The most basic thing you expect your government is to protect your lives. At home from outsiders. We all accept that there's going to be crime in our countries. But we can't even imagine somebody from the outside coming in and attacking our country. That's because that's the most basic thing we agreed upon with our governments. And that's what happened. and these people were taken. And at the moment, there's still 135 people in Gaza. Actually, half an hour ago, I got a push notification on my phone that 3 of the kidnapped people were probably killed in an attempt to rescue them a couple of hours ago. So it's 132. But this is an incredible break for Israeli society. It's trust in government, and specifically in this government. Okay? You know what? I'll do a short break here. Let's, if you have a question or want to say something, and feel free. Maybe we'll do a stop for a couple of minutes, and then we'll continue once more. Okie dokie. Loud and clear. Yeah. Go, John.
Yeah, sorry, Alan. One photo was interesting you showed of the people fleeing from northern Gaza to southern Gaza. Was there a checkpoint there? Why do they have to show documents? Who's checking? Isn't Gaza like, or was there a different group of people in southern Gaza than northern Gaza? I didn't quite grasp that.
What Israel was doing. Sorry, I'm trying to share this. Okay, this what you see here in this picture, the little leaflet that the man is holding, this hand is holding, that's the order by the Israeli military, the leaflets that were thrown over northern Gaza, describing where they're supposed to evacuate to. So you can see on the picture on the left, northern half of the Gaza Strip, where Gaza City is, and the bigger towns of Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, and 4 of the big refugee camps had to evacuate to the south. That is because Israel believes and knows, and now throughout these battles has shown, that so much of it has Hamas militant infrastructure, meaning a lot of capabilities of attacking from rockets and so forth. And in order to scour the place of these capabilities of attacking Israel, right, you have to remove the population if you don't want to get into a situation. I'll put it like this: in a military situation, you're a soldier. And in a fighting situation, there are only 2 options. The person that you see is not a threat, or he's a deathly threat to you. Because that's what you do, you're fighting. So if you have a lot of civilians will get injured when you have a lot of soldiers around. So Israel demanded about 1 million people move from the northern half of Gaza so that it could do its operations to find the capabilities that Hamas has, right? And that's what's happening now. And at the moment, they're still fighting in this area. I think I don't know if you see the, whatever you call it, the eastern side of Gaza City, in the big neighborhood of Shajaiya. There's a lot of fighting there. We talked before, intent and capabilities. That's in order to attack capabilities. Yep. When people are fleeing down to the south, you want to find intent, because they're not going to be fleeing with guns. And that's why the Hamas built tunnels. And these tunnels can be at times the size that a mid-sized truck can drive through them. These are not tiny tunnels only. That's where militants are going. But you never know what's trying to be smuggled. Maybe they're going to try and smuggle some of the kidnappees. Maybe they'll smuggle some of their leaders through there. So that's Israel having a blockade. If you see on the map, between Gaza City and where it says Deir el Balach, there's a road, and that's the only central road in Gaza. And that's where that picture was taken. People trying to say you can go and not. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. So Israel actually controlled that checkpoint. That's what I didn't understand, is that I thought people move freely in Gaza up and down, but actually Israel is controlling that blue line there. Is that right?
Okay, so let's make it clear. It's a good question you're asking. Before the 7th of October, there was no Israeli military presence in Gaza, really, right? After the 7th of October, what's happening in the last 2 months, the Israeli military is inside Gaza. In the northern half of Gaza, the vast majority of the population is not there anymore. Somewhere close to 800,000 people are no longer in that northern half, and they have moved down to the south and are living in tents as refugees inside Gaza Strip. And the people who are left there are majority Hamas that have capabilities there and want to harm the Israeli soldiers, are fighting the soldiers. That's what's left there. And so as the people were pushed down, Israel put people on this blue line in the map to make sure that it has control of what goes through. At the moment, there's also Israeli army in the southern half in what's written there as Khan Yunis. That's the city where actually Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, and also his second in command are both from there. So there is a thought that they might be hiding there. And Israel's, at the moment, at least, is attempting to find these people.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that.
Any questions, guys? Well, I'll just continue, and we'll stop again once we get a bit further. Okay. This very Jewish Clint Eastwood looking guy. This is our chief of staff, Herzi Halevi. He's the chief of staff of the Israeli military. And he got orders. He's the chief of staff, but his orders come from the government. And when Israel goes to war, and we are officially at war, very similar to the US, you have to have a congressional approval. There has to be an act of war. And in that act of war, you say, what are your goals? So these are the goals that the Israeli government put to the military. I couldn't find it in English, so I translated it. Number one, toppling Hamas rule and its military capabilities. That's a very clear military command. You see, it's being pretty exact. It's Hamas rule and military capabilities. And these are two things that are possible to achieve. Capabilities, it's a finite amount of things. There's a finite amount of guns and rockets and ammunition and bunkers. You can get to it. It just depends how long it will take. Hamas rule, it is like a country. They have people in ruling positions. There's somebody who's in charge of sanitation. So in order to break its rule, you have to get to the symbols of the rule and break that down. And that's also possible. Removing the threat of terror from Gaza towards Israel, this is something different. Terror is extremely subjective. What is terror? And what is the threat of terror? It's a very subjective thing. That's something, in Hebrew we call it a goat. When you make a list of demands from somebody, you put in there something that they'll ask, why is that there? Why do you have a goat in your list of demands? And then you'll just say, oh, never mind. You can push it out. This is something that the government needs to give to its Israeli population. Israelis are scared. 1,400 people murdered in a day. 350 of them inside their own homes. People are scared. They have to promise that, but that's something that as a military goal is very hard to achieve because you still might be scared. And that is what the threat of terror means. And the third one, and I try to translate it exactly, supreme effort in returning all kidnapped Israelis. This is a very realistic goal. The government said supreme effort. It doesn't say all. In the world of kidnap negotiations, you have to very quickly do something that nobody wants to do and put a price on people's lives. And people, this is one of the reasons being a leader has a lot of consequences. You have to make very, very tough decisions. And one of them is what is the price you're willing to pay for somebody's life? In 2014, Gilad Shalit was kidnapped to Gaza. And once he was released, Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to the price of 1,027 Palestinian prisoners, including convicted multi-murderers, for that one soldier. Israel decided at the beginning of this war that it's not willing to pay a comparable price because 250 times 1,000, that means concessions that you're not willing to give. But then the question is, what is exactly the price? Where is it between these two ends? And not every person is worth the same thing, as sad as it is to say it so callously. A child, all the world is an outrage that Hamas held children. It is absolutely inhumane. The youngest of the kidnappees was 10 months old. This is crazy. But some of these people that are kidnapped are active duty soldiers. Is that the same? Is a civilian woman and a civilian man the same? Is a female soldier and a male soldier? Is the rank of the soldier? There's lots of considerations here. So Israeli government said supreme effort in returning all kidnapped Israelis. This is also part of the very big break between Israel and its government. What does it mean that your government is willing to accept that some of your citizens will not return? It's a horrible proposition to contemplate. To contemplate what's happening with these people now. There are still around 132 people in captivity. It's a horrible, horrible thing. Israel was willing to exchange the women and children at a certain price. And then the ceasefire and this prisoner exchange stopped. You can blame, did the Hamas break the agreement? Did Israel break the agreement? In the end, the price the Hamas wanted was too high for what Israel was willing to pay. And Israel's decided to try and release them militarily. And at the moment, it's not going well. It has had no success. I'd say this is kind of how most of us see the world. This is very common. I see it as well. Military power is real power. Diplomatic power is very soft power. When you want to achieve something, military power. When you want to get to some very, very far goal and you have lots of time, diplomacy. That's absolutely true. But there was an ambassador to Israel, an American ambassador to Israel in the 90s called Martin Indyk. I don't know how well known he is in the US. And he wrote a book about the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And he has there a term I love. And he says there are in diplomacy elastic moments. During usual time, usual life, military power is real power because you can really push with it. You can really put force on the other side. And diplomacy is very weak little power. You're pushing very little. But he says there are moments in time that things become elastic and that little pressure makes a lot of movement. And that usually has to do with disasters. After disasters, the framework, the fabric of life kind of shifts and you can push more. And in a sense, we are in such a moment in Israel now, an elastic moment, both amongst Israelis and Palestinians, and amongst other partners in the Middle East, and in a sense in the world at large. It's an elastic moment now. Do you know what? Are there any questions before I go on to talk about Israeli politics? Okie dokie. Let's talk. Look what a bunch of smiling people. This is the Israeli government as it was inaugurated at the beginning of the year. And it is Israel's most far-right government. Obviously, there is you can see my slant coming out there by calling it the most far-right government, but also technically speaking, within our parliament, the parties, we have a coalition system, many parties, and we build a coalition with a lot of parties. The American system, 2 parties, which one will have a majority over the other. Here we have lots of little parties, and together you create a coalition. This coalition includes only people who see themselves as right of center, right? There's not even, none of these parties are centrist. None of them will call themselves a centrist party. The most left-leaning of these parties is the party of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, of the Likud, the guy sitting in the center with the blue tie. He is the most left-leaning. And in no way would he ever accept anything but calling him a centrist. He sees himself as a man of the right. From there, it goes more to the right. And it includes all the parties right of center. Benjamin Netanyahu in the elections won 23.5% of the votes, 32 seats, clearly the largest party in the elections, right? He needed to create a coalition. He brought in the guy next to him with the kippah, the black kippah. This is Aryeh Deri. He is the Sephardic ultra-Orthodox Jews, his party. Sephardic ultra-Orthodox, 8.25% of the vote. On the left edge of the photo, the 2 guys, the smiley guy, and next to him, the guy with the big white beard, they are the Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox, right? They're the guy on the left is a Litvak, and the guy on the right, he's a Chassid. Never mind. But they're ultra-Orthodox Jews, and all of these parties, they do not serve in the military, and they do not get they don't go to regular schools, they don't study things, they focus all their lives on studying Torah. So a big portion of his government today are people that have no connection to the military, no connection to the kibbutz movement, and therefore no connection to the tragedy, directly I mean, that happened on the 7th of October. Their children don't go to fight in the army, and their children don't live in the areas that were affected directly. So there's a lot of anger towards them in Israeli society today. The two guys in the middle, they're the most right wing in the government. There's one that knows how to tie a tie, and then there's the guy who doesn't know how to tie a tie amongst the two, right? The guy in front of the microphone was the pretty well tie, Bezalel Smotrich. He is the head of the Settler Party. He's today Minister of Finance, and he comes from a very, very strong pro-settlement party. He himself lives in a settlement. All his members of parliament live in settlements. He is very much from that position. He thinks a lot about the connection of Judaism as a religion and land, right? His party is called the Nationalist Zionists, National Zionists. And his partner, the guy who was the glasses, Itamar Ben-Gvir, he comes from a little party that until 4 elections ago was illegal in Israel for being a party that incites hate and racism. He changed the name and reformed it. Now it's called Jewish Power. And he is the minister in charge of internal security, police and so forth, FBI and stuff like that. Both of them were arrested many times by Israel's security services for being involved in Jewish terrorism. None of them were found guilty of it. Specifically, the guy on the left was put in administrative detention for a short while. He was deemed such a threat that he was put in jail without trial. And now he's in charge of the police. The last point I was going to show you here, if you look, I just added the percentage. They have 64 seats, but they have 48.5% of the vote. In a quirk of our electoral system, like your American system is quirky enough, but our electoral system creates a situation where they won only 48.5% of the vote, but they won the government. So even before the 7th of October, Bibi and his coalition did not have a majority. It was a quirk. 2 parties from the left side, for whatever reasons, were discounted in the electoral process, and they lost around 5.5%. If that wouldn't have happened, this would have made a different government, one without Netanyahu. But why am I harping about this government and specifically Netanyahu? First of all, because that's what Israelis are doing at the moment. His approval ratings are below 20% at the moment, and that's, for me personally, a surprise that it's so high, but it's below 20%. Because he was the prime minister when this happened, but also this is what he had to say about the situation. And we actually have to listen to his words. Sometimes we get lost by how he speaks and not by what he says. In September 1996, when he became prime minister for the first time, he said, "There isn't and won't be a Palestinian state between the Jordan and the sea. Jewish presence and settlement in all Judea and Samaria will live, flourish, and exist forever." It's very clear where he comes from. He's against the Palestinian state and for Jewish settlement in the Palestinian or in the occupied territories. March 2015, he's still prime minister. There are elections. He says, "If I win the elections, there will be no Palestinian state during my term." He said it clearly, not hidden or anything. April 2019, he says that he wants to put Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank, meaning to make the West Bank officially, legally part of Israel without giving Palestinians citizenship. That's what he meant in this, right? He said that clearly. The picture of Netanyahu with the red background, this is really him talking about his relationship or how he thinks about the Hamas. And this is very well put by him. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state, and that's his prime goal. Netanyahu and his coalition's prime goal is to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state because they truly believe that that land is the heartland of the Jewish people. It's not a joke for them. They believe it, right? Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to the Hamas. This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. He said that when he was criticized for passing money on to the Hamas. We talked about the Hamas before. The Hamas doesn't have sources of income, really. A bit of export of goods from there, but has very little sources of income. In order to keep it running, to have electricity and water, Israel supplies 80% of the drinking water to Gaza, but it doesn't supply it for free. It's paying for it, right? The Gazans are paying. Israel doesn't supply electricity for free. You know, you'll have an electrical outage in one state, another state will give it electricity. That state is going to pay for that electricity in the end. So in order to give the Hamas enough money, Qatar in 2014 agreed to pass in tens of millions of dollars to the Hamas. But the Hamas wasn't connected to the world's banking system. The Hamas doesn't have any connection to the banking system. So you can't Venmo them money. You can't send money in any way, right? So if you can't send money to the Hamas like that, a Gulfstream jet would land in Israel every month from Qatar, and people would get off with suitcases, with 40 million US dollars in the suitcases, duffel bags. There have been pictures of this. And they would be driven into Gaza, not under Israel's nose, but with Israeli police protection till Gaza, because it's a lot of money. And this was Netanyahu's idea. He's been prime minister for a very long time, now for almost 14 years nonstop. This was his plan. And his idea is, if you want to stop the Palestinians from having their own state in the West Bank, you have to strengthen Hamas. Not to make it strong, but you need to have it just above the zero, just simmering. Because if it's simmering, each time somebody from the world says, Israel, you need to negotiate a deal that gives the Palestinians a state, Israel can always say, look over there, that's Gaza. They're still terrorists. They're the Palestinians. I cannot make a deal with them. That's what Netanyahu is saying here. Give the Hamas money in order to stop a Palestinian state. And this is his finance minister when he was younger, and this is Israeli prison guard. Are there any questions till now? Anyone? Boop, 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 boop. Boop. Boop, boop. Okay. Let's jump this. This is not that. Let's do this. Okay. What is the situation in Israel now? Approval ratings are under 20% for Netanyahu, and other parts of his government are even lower. This poll that was done about a month ago, I want to say, asked Israelis, what do you think will happen after the war? And there were a lot of answers, and the most popular answer was mass civil protests. And then they asked it again according to your political backing, leftist, centrist, and right wing. do you expect there to be mass protests? Not do you agree with the mass protests? Do you expect there to be mass protests? And generally speaking, 3 out of 4 Israelis are certain there will be massive protests once this war stops. Massive protests. If anybody is asking themselves, why is Netanyahu still continuing with the war if there's criticism from the world? 3 days ago, the UN tried to pass a resolution about a ceasefire in Israel. The United States vetoed that resolution. The United Kingdom abstained, said, and everybody else voted against, including obvious culprits like Russia or China, but also France and other countries you wouldn't expect to be so clear cut. Those who are following the news of what's happening in academia, in protests, the sentiment is moving away from the horror of what happened on the 7th of October and moving towards the idea of the senselessness of war and the massive civilian casualties in Gaza by the Israeli army's actions to try and finish the Hamas and get hostages back. Why isn't Benjamin Netanyahu changing tack? Why isn't Benjamin Netanyahu saying, okay, we are doing this very hard thing of trying to get these people out because the Hamas are unacceptable partners, but once it's over, we will go towards some sort of resolution. Very simply, because you heard him before. He's not for that resolution. His government is against that resolution. Therefore, he's in a bind. Netanyahu is in a bind. If he backs down from the war, he knows what's expecting him, what he can expect, sorry. And that's massive civil protests. This is a protest from when Netanyahu came to power. When Netanyahu came to power, he tried to change the legal system in Israel on some very important points, and massive protests started. The big surprise of these protests, and I've been in many a protests against Netanyahu's government for many years, mea culpa. I've been in many of them. When this protest started, I was shocked. Suddenly, 80% of the people coming to the protests are coming with Israeli flags. Until then, if you protested the right-wing government of Netanyahu, in a sense, you were seen as anti-Israel security. That was part of the way society talked about you. Once these protests started, the protesters came with flags. Today in Israel, if you see a flag flying from somebody's house, 95% chance that means he's against Netanyahu's government. The protests grew. This was the first protest in Jerusalem. Almost 200,000 people came on that day. The next protest grew to about 500,000 people, all with the Israeli flags against Netanyahu's government. Lots of these, people, creativity. This is a kind of some protester, Netanyahu in prison garb. The protests in Tel Aviv, this is last July, right? They were 300,000 people in these protests in the central intersection of Tel Aviv against Netanyahu and his government. The protests became more creative. This is before the 7th of October. About the death toll coming from Palestinian terrorism and Israeli terrorism in the West Bank. Younger people started blockading the highways. This is the demonstrations now. This is from last week. And it's no longer just left-wing people or centrist people or people proud of the country as the flag or veterans or three of the last chiefs of staff of the military, heads of the Mossad, heads of the internal security services. It's also grandparents of children kidnapped in Gaza. This man in the last protest 2 weeks ago is protesting. The building behind him is where Netanyahu on next Tuesday is going to be inside that courtroom because his trial is happening now. Netanyahu is under trial for corruption charges. He knows he doesn't have any wiggle room here, Netanyahu. And this is an aerial photo of these protests. This is before the 7th of October. And no doubt they will be larger. Israel is at a very tense moment. Israelis have lost so much, have gone into a space of a lot of fear, a lot of doubt. I checked exactly how much it would cost to send my daughters to an English medium school in Amsterdam or in Paris. We have family there if I'll need to leave. Israelis are scared here. But that's an elastic moment that we're in. Because suddenly people realize that the conception was that we can keep the Hamas simmering. And I'll tell you the truth, I have a lot of criticism towards Benjamin Netanyahu. But life here in the last 15 or 10 to 15 years, pretty nice. Earnings have gone up. I am making more money than I did 15 years ago for the same work that I do. I have more. There are more options. Artists are coming to have shows in Israel. You know, flights to Europe are super cheap. These were a lot of successes that Netanyahu's way, which said, I will keep the Hamas at a very low simmer, and I will block any attempt for a settled solution that's based on return of land to Palestinians in the West Bank, was successful. He succeeded. And if you were like me and were against this policy, we had very little what to say in the end that was really convincing to people because life was good here. Life was good. In this photo of the protest, there's a building in blue. Exactly behind it is a really cool area to go and get dinner. Really cool. Really fun. That Netanyahu, he's been prime minister for so long. He gets credit for creating that. He gets credit for succeeding in keeping the Hamas in a sense in the simmer and having the West Bank shunted and life being pretty okay. That's the conception that we had, that this is possible. Simmer Hamas, push the West Bank back. On the 7th of October, Israelis had that conception shattered. Can no longer do this. Our world shattered in that moment. It's a moment of elasticity. Israelis understand that the world can't continue as it is. Israel can't continue with Palestinians as they are. But also the Palestinians understand that as well. The Palestinians feel that as well. They felt like in 1 second, the Arab world is going to make peace deals with Israel and they'll be left out. They, through this horrible act, put themselves back into the center of this debate. Everybody accepts Hamas can't rule Gaza anymore. Or you know what? Majority accepts Israel's ideas like that. But believe me, all the Arab states believe that as well. All of them want Hamas out, except Yemen, maybe. The last opinion poll in the West, amongst Palestinians, asks them which countries do you see as the least helpful in this situation. Usually, no offense, the US is the least helpful in their public view. At the moment, the least helpful in their view is Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and then the United States. They recognize that even the Arab world doesn't want Hamas. It's an inflection point. The politics in Palestine are going to be changing as well. The world has interests in this area. The Abraham Accords that Benjamin Netanyahu started, they are something real now. And Israel is going to have pressure from there as well. This is an elastic moment. Netanyahu knows that if he doesn't stop this from developing, and don't know how will he do that, this is what's waiting for him. The last time that they did election polls, about a week and a half ago, this was the answers. There were election polls today. They did change by a couple of percentage, but nothing too serious. The guy in the photo waving his hand is Netanyahu's prime adversary politically, Benny Gantz. He has at the moment 14 members of parliament and he's jumping up to 43. It's not doubling, it's almost tripling his power. Netanyahu is going down from 32 to 18, almost halving himself. His coalition, which was 64 seats, suddenly becomes only 41. Tomorrow, if there are elections, Netanyahu is out. Bezalel Smotrich, the guy who's the finance minister, doesn't even get to the minimum that will bring him into government or into the parliament. This is what's waiting Netanyahu. So we are sitting at an elastic moment now. What it will allow, a moment like this allows Israel to do everything it can to eliminate Hamas military power and ruling capabilities. But Israel will have to also not just do one side of it. Once you destroy, you have to have a way to rebuild. That's the elastic moment for the regional powers. Qatar, Saudi, Emirates, they're dying to do something with their money that will make them look a little bit better than how the West sees them. Rebuilding Gaza is something they dearly want to do, but that has to be part of a negotiated deal. Most importantly, is change the way we do things. Military power has its uses, but it has its faults. We say in Hebrew, I think maybe this is also in English, for a hammer, every problem is a nail. If you don't say it in English, we'll just say that I invented it. If you do, then whatever. But for a military, every problem has a military solution. We have to go back to dialogue, diplomacy. My formative years were the 90s. I was a teenager in the mid-90s. And that's my lot in life. Somebody who was born earlier or his formative years were the Vietnam War or the Second World War would be different. I grew up in the 90s. I grew up, and that's why I love Nirvana, I love grunge music, but I also believe in diplomacy because in my lifetime, when I was a teenager, Nelson Mandela was let out of jail. The Soviet Union collapsed. Berlin Wall fell. The war in Ireland ended. Israel and Palestine, the Oslo Accords, peace with Jordan. Not all of these things went exactly like we planned, but they were monumentous change. That was an elastic moment in history. We are again in one of those. And if in an elastic moment you use a hammer all the time, that doesn't work on elastic material. You can't break them. You just bounce back into your face. In elastic moments, smaller nudges work much bigger distances. And this is my view, not only mine, many others. This also echoes, generally speaking, the American government's view at the moment, right? And this also parrots what regional Arab powers are saying. In order to do that, Israel has to do three main things. It has to reduce settlements and reduce settler violence. The settlers in a lot of places understand that change is coming. They also understand that this is an elastic moment. So there's been a very, 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 very big uptick in violence by settlers against Palestinians. Not to say there isn't a lot of violence from Palestinians towards settlers as well, but specifically, there were a couple of 100% uptick in reported settler violence. There has to be a change in that. Number one, you have to put control there. Number two, if you want to change something and you don't give credit to anybody on the other side, like Israel did, Israel left the Gaza Strip unilaterally, didn't give anything to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank because they didn't want to support them in their cause for a separate national government. Somebody will take that credit. And who took the credit for Israel's leaving Gaza? The Hamas. And that made them much stronger. Therefore, Israel must give the Palestinian Authority a greater role. Obviously, it is corrupt. Israel knows it's corrupt, and 82% of Palestinians say it is corrupt. That can be changed. Give them a greater role. Add a role for other Gulf states to come in and show them good governance or whatever. But you have to give them more control and you have to give territorial concessions. There's no reason why, let's say, the agricultural areas of Palestinian villages are not part of Palestinian controlled land. That would be a minimum of a win for the people who are willing to talk to you. I'll stop here. Let's open up for a discussion. If there's questions, or there's no wrong question, there's nothing that you shouldn't ask. There's nothing. This is a moment that these questions should be asked. I don't know. Whatever I'm trying to say. Rick, shoot.
Well, an official hello to Elon, and thank you. Sorry.
Unlike Smotrich, you know how to tie a tie.
That's true. Thank you. Okay. First of all, every question I had, sort of your next slide anticipated. So you've done a great job there. But what I've been trying to reconcile is all of those photos of the protests, if I'm correct, were around protests against the Netanyahu government, around the judicial system and sort of other incredibly internal dynamics. And then, of course, the war breaks out and people can criticize Netanyahu's government for security and safety. So if you project ahead to, is it Gantz, who may be a likely prime minister in the not too distant future, let's say, what is that? How does that person lead in an international context and also an internal, while maintaining what will inevitably be fear and security concerns? How does that person patch all of those fragments together?
I'll start at the very beginning, the protests. Okay, the protests did start in this round around Netanyahu's attempt to change the legal system in Israel. That was the impetus for the mass protests to start. But this is after a decade of protests against Netanyahu. The first protests against Netanyahu were when he was Minister of Finance, about the cost of living in Israel. And they were the first massive protests in Israel. Then there were protests against him for his stance on ultra-Orthodox and military service. There were protests against him for his corruption. There were protests against him, albeit much smaller, around the Palestinian issue. All of these things came together. Protests weren't just about the Supreme Court, it was about all of these things together. The Supreme Court issue just brought in new constituents into this, brought in people who are much more centrist and starting to lean to the right. What's happening now to that coalition, also a lot of truly right-wing people are coming in the sense that Netanyahu is no longer an acceptable prime minister. The majority of Israel, vast majority, believes that. Within politics, things don't happen like this. That's the world of diplomacy. It's slower. Elections aren't supposed to be till 2025. But once Netanyahu will have to scale down the military offensive, reservists will come back. These are young people. There's around 330,000 of them. These are the people who are most affected. They were the ones who were protesting before, and they are the ones who will be let loose from reserve duty before Hamas disappears. And then they'll come home and ask themselves, why was I fighting if I didn't finish the Hamas or bring back all the hostages? So that's one thing. Second thing, Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz was in the last government with Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett. There were almost 2 years in Israel that Netanyahu wasn't in power. And this was a very wide coalition government. It had in it settlers and members of parliament that come from the Muslim League, right? Very, very wide coalition. And if Benny Gantz is known for anything in Israeli public, one, he is a ex-chief of staff of the military. He's very much a military man. The second thing that he's known for is being a middle-of-the-way guy. The guy that will talk to everybody. The guy that wants people together. He's very mild-mannered. He's slightly boring as a person. He also runs a lot on the ticket of being a security person and also on the ticket of, you have to talk, guys. We have to talk. He will not say something bad about Netanyahu. Not very bad. He comes to it from a very different way. He's not my cup of tea, but he definitely is a kind of guy that brings people together. And he's this emblem of what Israel is clamoring for. If I answer the question. Sure.
Ilan,
Yeah.
what type of territorial concessions are possibly being thought about?
The basic territorial concession says that Gaza and the West Bank become a Palestinian state. Now, that's a big jump from the situation we are at today,
Mhm.
right? That's why a lot of times, it's hard to think about those things very easily because you're saying, how the heck do we get to that far point from that? That's what diplomacy is good at. Military is not good at that. Military is good at, I need something to be done tomorrow. Diplomacy is the art of how do I get something done in the far future. So this would mean slowly giving Palestinians more control over tracts of land, of areas, of economic viability. Once we would have talked about it as if that's a interaction between Israel and the Palestinians. And within these two, there's a lot of mistrust. But we are in an elastic moment because suddenly Netanyahu brought in those guys in the UAE, he brought in the guys in Qatar, he brought in Morocco. We suddenly have relations with a lot of Arab countries, almost with Saudi. And they're all saying, let us be the umbrella that helps the Palestinians change and get to a better situation. So no longer is it Israel give things to the people you distrust. It's Israel give to the people you trust a bit more to help those people. And it's a triangular kind of deal.
Mhm.
That's what you're coming up to now. And that's why it's an elastic moment. I'm not just calling it a hopeful moment, la-di-da, I believe in kumbaya. It's really an elastic moment. They have interests here. In our next session, I'll really talk about what are their interests, what are the US interests, and so forth. Sandy, you want to ask something?
I have a question, John. So, why did that coalition government fail? Benny Gantz, Lapid, Bennett.
Simply because Netanyahu succeeded in stealing 4 members of parliament. This shows my slant on stealing. A member of parliament can do more or less what he wants as long as his constituents will agree with it. But 4 members of parliament who were on the coalition of Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, and Naftali Bennett, these were the 3 main people in that coalition. Is it 4 or 3? I don't remember if it was 4 or 3. Netanyahu succeeded in pulling them into his camp. That's as if one day you have somebody who is a Republican and you have a hung Congress, and then he says, I was promised to become, Secretary of HUD, as if he'd want that, but whatever. Yeah, promise something that he wants, and he says, okay, now I become a Democrat. And suddenly the Democrats have 51 in Senate, right? Whatever. He succeeded in pulling those and called for a vote of no confidence and won the vote of no confidence. That's how he succeeded. Why did they move? That's another question. Some, and a lot would say, because they were promised things that would be better for their political future. Others will say they moved because these guys were anyway in a very precarious spot. They didn't truly believe in how the government is going forward, the coalition government. And they wanted to go, and they knew that their voters are more right-wing. And that's why they moved. And there's a video of one of these 4, Idit Silman, who's now a minister. She was a backbencher, and now she got a ministry. And you can see her in lots of photos next to Netanyahu lately. He's giving her what she wanted. She moved. She's a religious lady with a large family, and after October 7th, she wanted to go, the only member of government that wanted to go and visit injured people in the hospital as a member of government, to come be there. And she's been screamed out of many hospitals and hotels, screamed out. And there's a few videos of that. People today feel that that was betrayal. That's
So
me.
I have a question.
Yes, Suzanne.
You said Netanyahu starts a trial on Tuesday?
Oh, no, it's continued trial. It's been going on for 2.5 years.
Oh, okay. I thought it had been going on for a while, but so he's going to be in trial and running the war at the same time.
Yes. I said this Tuesday because on this Tuesday he's supposed to appear in court. Whenever there's usually he doesn't come to the courthouse when the trial's happening. He got like an exemption. Usually if you're being tried, you have to sit down, right? But he got an exemption during the time of the prosecution, except on some very specific points. And this Tuesday is going to be one of those specific points, right? That he'll have to come in. We'll see if that will happen, right? But
Would he go to jail if he were convicted of his crimes?
yes, he's accused of 4 counts of corruption and misuse of public office. All legal opinions would believe that he will be found guilty of majority of these crimes, right? Some people will say that the prosecutors were corrupted or they were this is a political hatchet job and so forth. That's Netanyahu and his backers' claim. However, everybody do agree that if you're found guilty of these crimes, you do go to jail. And we do have 2 very good examples. We have a president and we have a ex-prime minister who sat in jail for similar crimes. One of my closest friends here in Jaffa is the son of Ehud Olmert, who sat in jail for almost 3 years for corruption. But that's one of the reasons that I was trying to change the judicial system in the beginning of his new government.
Sort of like what's going on in the United States right now.
Very similar, right? And in the same type of arguments are coming up that this is a political hatchet job.
Mhm.
You know, everybody's slanted. Everybody is. But sometimes, you have evidence. Says X or Y or Z. Okay. And this is the Netanyahu trial is going to probably take at least another year and a half, even though the courts want to make it quicker. So that's how with him out of power. So, guys, any questions?
Does this, quick question, does this trial have any effect on what the concessions will be then for Palestinians and Israel?
This friend of mine, whose father was Prime Minister of Israel, and he sat in jail for corruption. He is the last Prime Minister of Israel to come up with an offer for a negotiate peace with Palestinians. In 2009, Ehud Olmert offered the Palestinians the most generous offer that Israel has ever given to the Palestinians, right? And with a lot of concessions. There's a lot of things back in the U.S. The White House has like Camp David, they have a place called Y Plantation, just around there in Maryland. And they went there for a couple of days, he and Abu Mazen, and he offered a lot of things. And at the end, Abu Mazen, the Palestinians said, no, thank you. And this was a big shocker. But Abu Mazen also said why. People forgot this, but in 2009, Abu Mazen said, why I cannot sign a peace treaty with a prime minister who's going to be out of office in a couple of weeks for corruption charges. The next government, which was even then thought it would be Netanyahu, and it really became Netanyahu, will not abide by this, will not agree with this peace deal. And actually, a couple of weeks later, Ehud Olmert really resigned from his prime ministership, because unlike Netanyahu, he said, I cannot be both a prime minister and under criminal trial at the same time.
Mhm.
And then he lost his criminal trial and sat in jail. So your question originally was about the trial. If anything, the trial makes it such that Netanyahu has less.
Yeah.
The trial is really the reason why Netanyahu has this very, very, very right-wing government. Nobody else is willing to touch him with a stick. The right-wing government asks of Netanyahu very simple things. Give us a lot of money for specific education for ultra-Orthodox Jews and don't ask us to go to the military. And we will vote anything you want. And the settlers say, okay, on the other hand, make sure there's no Palestinian state and we'll give you whatever you want on this judicial thing.
Mm.
That's why he was in this government. This is not an easy government for him either, politically speaking.
Yeah.
The trial is the nemesis of Netanyahu. He's willing to do almost everything to get away from jail.
Of course.
Thank you, Ilan.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Okay, kiddos. Thank you so much. I again, a hard subject. I loved talking to you, as you can see. Thank you for this. It just makes my day. It really does.
Well, thank you. Thank you for such personal and outlook on what your life is like now, what the Israelis' lives are. We
Appreciate
don't
the
see that here.
Thank you. That's the point. And I just missed talking to you guys so much. It's so much excitement. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's love
Ilan.
hearing your voice again, Ilan.
Thanks, thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much.
All the best.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.